The Ventilator tool is a very neat little tool in View 6, which allows us to manipulate plant species by using something other than the overall global wind. So let's go ahead and just load in a quick plant really quick by right mouse clicking on our little tree over on the left. And we can just load in any one of these. I'm going to load in a tree. And we're going to select the summer cherry tree and click OK. Now I'm going to zoom out of our camera view just a little and deselect our tree and then add our ventilator. Now there's two different types of ventilators. We have a directional ventilator and an omni ventilator. The difference is a directional ventilator, let's just go ahead and load one up. It sort of looks like a spotlight, and it's even similar to a spotlight in its specific numeric options, but let's actually take a look at how this works. The directional ventilator will allow us to point, of course, whatever in our cone we have right here, and it'll manipulate our objects within that area. Now an omni ventilator will essentially just blow wind in every direction, but with the directional ventilator we can of course point this to more specific areas. And what we can also do is even change this back and forth. Once one is created, we can of course switch to another. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom in actually just a little bit in all of our views so we can really see that tree and what happens when we move around our ventilator. Alright, now we're just moving this over the tree and you can see that's breaking it apart and it's bending the branches down. And because we're using the omni ventilator right now, it doesn't really matter where it's pointing, just where our actual object is intersecting or near our plant objects. Another very cool thing about ventilators is that they also affect ecosystems. So if we load in an ecosystem or a terrain, anything with an ecosystem containing plant objects, the ventilators will affect those objects as well. So it doesn't have to be just single trees. We can do it over an entire forest of an ecosystem. So it's a very flexible tool, very cool. And let's take a look at some of the other options we actually have for this ventilator. If we go up to the upper right, we can see our options for our omni ventilator. And we have our intensity, which allows us to change how powerful this ventilator is. And then of course our cutoff, so how close it has to be to an object in order for it to affect it. And we could change these values to higher amounts, lower amounts, depending on what it is you need for your scene. What we can also do is even add a filter, or edit a filter, make your own, for this tree. So we can manipulate non-linearly how the ventilator works. Now let's go ahead and change this to the directed, and we can see that we have two more options. We have spread and fall off. And if we open up our spread, you'll see our cone opens up and affects a wider area. And then we can, of course, adjust our fall off so that we have the intensity decreasing around the edges. So let's go ahead and zoom out our top view. You can see our ventilator, adjust our fall off, and we can see that ring change in the center. We'll go ahead and zoom out just a little bit more. And as we adjust this fall off, we can just see the inner and outer ring expanding to adjust for how much the fall off is going to be for that ventilator. And we have one less option, which is on the bottom. And what this will allow us to do is influence our ecosystems. So we can check this on if we're working with the ecosystems, or we can just leave it checked off if we're not using any ecosystems in our scene and the ventilators do not need to affect it. So it's a very, very cool tool, the ability to affect infinite number of trees, anything we could have in our ecosystems, and we could just have it affect these large-scale forests that we can create, and pretty much anything you can do with an ecosystem you can affect with our ventilators, just as long as they are, of course, plant species.